Welcome back to the EP Growth Podcast. My name's Chris, and I'm joined today by a special guest. Well, I guess special, I suppose, but this guest has walked a slightly different path to the traditional EP route. So, a path that's equally interesting, I think, and definitely worth hearing about today. So, Holly Fuda, welcome, NRLW Wellbeing Manager at the Newcastle Knights and founder of Tude Wellbeing. Holly, thanks so much for coming on today. I'm keen to hear all
Thanks for
about
having
it.
me.
No worries. Beautiful. Can you kick us off? How did it all start? So, sports science at Newcastle University, yeah?
I was at ACU actually.
ACU, right. So,
Yeah. I grew up in Sydney,
yep.
and so I started my degree there at Strathfield ACU, and it was called exercise science at that point. And I guess when I started that degree, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to work in sport. And I think this was one of the main degrees that kind of gives you a little bit of a taste for everything. Um, And I think that's the beauty of the degree as well, because it gives you a little bit of a taste of everything. You can start to find out what works and what doesn't work for you. So yeah, I started that and then moved down to Melbourne and transferred my degree down there. So went down to the same ACU down in Melbourne, and that was an easy transfer. Finished that degree and managed to land a role at the Melbourne Storm, working in community and participation and kind of looking at ways to grow the game. And then after that, I guess, well, kind of through that time, I went back to uni and did my diploma of education and did a bit of teaching. And I guess I always knew I wanted to work in wellbeing and see what wellbeing was and what sport does for their athletes, and I guess what sport does for the wider community as well. And ended up moving back to Sydney to get into that role at New South Wales Rugby League. And then now I'm up here at the Knights, so transferred up here in 2021 to work on their NRLW program.
What a time to be based out of Newcastle. The Knights were just chatting about that. Flying at the moment must be the well-being.
Yeah, they're doing really well. It's really exciting for the town. We know that the Hunter region really, backs their footy team, and so being a part of that, I'm really grateful for. And any role I can play in supporting the athletes is something that I'm really passionate about.
Nice. So you touched on there when you finished the exercise science component. Then you always knew you wanted to go down the well-being routes. Did that sort of help that decision making at the time? Because what I've heard a fair bit of is this: so you get to the end of that sports science or exercise science, whatever that undergraduate degree is, and then the beauty of it is you have so many options, but then it's also quite daunting in that, I've got so many options. I don't know where to go. I don't know what's out there. Was that decision easy for you because you knew you wanted to go into well-being?
Yes and no. Like I think just based off speaking from a female perspective, is when I went into exercise science, I actually wanted to do physio. And I think that's because historically that's really been the only role that women have been aware of in sport, not as an athlete, but you haven't really seen coaches or, other roles within a football club or within a sport. So it was mainly physio. So that kind of steered me towards that area. But then as I went through the degree, the first thing was really working out what I didn't want to do. So, getting an understanding of biomechanics was probably not my favorite area, although extremely important from an athlete and coaching perspective. But that was something I wasn't really keen on. So I started looking at ways of, what I liked and what I didn't like. I liked the idea of rehab and working with players or athletes as they kind of come through their injuries. But then I also loved the psychology part as well. So I think the first thing that really struck me was around visualization and mental imagery, and looking at how athletes prepare for their chosen performance. So like specifically, I remember high jump, looking at those athletes and how they prepare mentally, physically, emotionally to complete their jump. And so that kind of gave me a bit of an idea of, wanting to maybe potentially moving into that area. But like you said, it is pretty broad. So I think I was lucky in the sense that I landed the job at the Melbourne Storm while I was still at uni. So I got to put a few things into practice and yeah.
Yeah, nice. I think that's it's kind of refreshing to hear because I certainly didn't know where I was going, what I was doing at that university, and to hear it from you as well, and to break it down. Well, I'm not sure exactly what I want to do, but I know I don't want to go those routes. Like that's okay, and that can help you sort of narrow down the field of where you want to go, and maybe we'll touch on sort of more of that thinking, I suppose, when we talk about the wellness role that you complete now, and if you use any of those sorts of strategies and mindsets now. But we'll touch on that into the future. But later into the podcast, I should say. But you transitioned into education after that. So how did
Yeah,
is that just a natural progression along that line?
yeah, I think I almost looked at teaching as like a little bit of a trade in the sense that once you've got it, you've always got it. You can kind of go anywhere with it as well. But once I actually started teaching, I realized that probably the system's not for me. I really enjoy education and I enjoy teaching and learning and working with others to achieve something. But yeah, probably the system didn't work for me. So that probably steered me into looking at other ways that we educate people, staying in sport. And I think, well-being and education definitely fits that area. But I also think that, it's good to just try things as well. And I think if any students have the opportunity to volunteer or be involved in their local leagues or clubs or whatnot, like that can give them some really great, I guess, like experience in that area.
I think that's a great tip for any of the listeners is that voluntary experience work like that. Do you think that there's a lot of crossover between talking to people in a well-being role or in a clinical role and then in more of an educational teaching role? Do you think there's a lot of crossover there?
Can you just repeat that for me?
Yeah. So do you think that if you're volunteering in working for a football club or something like that, and then working in a clinical setting or in a well-being role where you have to communicate with people all the time, do you think there's a lot of crossover in skill sets there that it's beneficial to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we spoke a little bit about that industry day when I first met you with the soft skills that they're called, that are really transferable across different roles and different industries is, around communication and teamwork and being able to work, I guess, in a way that is different or ability to adapt to change and problem solve. And I think sport offers that consistently. So whether you're an athlete, whether you're a coach, whether you're, someone watching a game as well, like it's learning all of those skills and being able to take them into your work.
Yeah, certainly. I think we see that a bit here when we have some younger students come through, they're finishing off their placement, and it tends to be the ones that have been out and seen a few other environments, different experiences, and had to sort of learn to adapt, as you just said, tend to do a little bit better. So I think it's certainly a great tip from you there is if you can go out and volunteer, get involved in different environments and start honing those soft skills. But you touched on joining, was the Storm originally? Melbourne Storm
Yeah.
football down. How did that come about? Because I think there'd be many listeners just going, "Oh, right, like how do I just get lined up with a football team? That would be fantastic." Certainly something I thought about when I was an undergrad. I was like, how many jobs are there with these sports teams? Like, is that a thing? So how did it come about?
Yeah, I just started casually in doing whatever they needed, really. And when it comes to a football club or a sporting club, there's so many different roles. I think we kind of think that there's only a couple, but there are so many different roles in terms of marketing, in terms of organization, logistics, and operations. And sometimes, just offering to assist and get the foot in the door is a great way to start. And then you could potentially, assist on game days when they need hands on deck, doing whatever's necessary.
Hmm.
And then, I think once you've got your foot in the door, then you start to see what are the roles, what am I interested in, what do I like doing, what do I not like doing, to help shape, I guess, where you want to take the degree. And I think, look, exercise science or sports science really is a degree learning about human beings, physiologically, psychologically, it's all around that, and that is transferable across so many industries. And I think that's the beauty of the degree as well. It gives you a little bit of a foot in to how people work.
Yeah, I think that's pretty well put, actually. That's, yeah, because when you do stop, like you can get wrapped up in, performance elements, or I've got to improve this, or it's very gym orientated. But if the major block for that person is a psychological one and you haven't considered it, yeah, you really do need to pay attention to the person. So that's beautiful. I love that. So I guess, yeah, starting with the Storm really began with the courage to ask, to put your hand up to go down there, which is, again, brilliant. And then starting to transition into a well-being officer. So what does a well-being officer look like? What is the day-to-day there?
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people ask this question, and it's really hard to answer because every day looks really different. But in terms of working in the NRL have got a team of wellbeing and education that sit as part of the football department, from the governing body, and then they kind of pass down mandatory things that are required. So that could be things like specific education that needs to be delivered, certain number of check-ins, certain number of kind of screening of players, and we've got a database where we need to enter in all of our meetings and all of their goals and what they're working towards. So there's kind of mandated things, and then clubs have got the ability to roll out whatever they want on top of that. So, I'm lucky at the Knights with Ronald Griffiths as our coach for the NRLW team. He is a big believer in wellbeing, and I guess over my career, there's been plenty of times I've worked with coaches and staff that will probably don't know what wellbeing is, but also don't believe that it's as important as, like you were just saying there, like the strength and conditioning in the gym and things like that. But I guess the research is now coming and telling us, more with technology and more as we advance in terms of performance, is well-being and that holistic development of our athletes is really where the gold is. And I think, over the last couple of years at the Knights, we've really seen that come to fruition. And that's been really rewarding for me working in the space, but also for the athletes being able to develop themselves and understand themselves, as people first. And being an athlete is yes, it's part of their identity, but not identifying as just an athlete.
Yeah. Have you had any experiences, be it with like coaching staff or executive types, or even to players, athletes, where well-being has not been a huge priority? They don't want to talk about it, they don't want to focus on it at all, and you've had to sort of break down those barriers?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
How does that go?
It's probably more common than finding someone that is interested in it. It is a battle, and it's a battle for the wellbeing managers in those roles. I think relationship skills and communication is probably one of the key skills that are required for someone in that role, because you do have to come up against traditional approaches, which is that, I've had coaches in the past say to me things like, you're not to speak to the players unless I say you can,
Oh,
which goes against really what my role is, which is literally speak to the players.
yeah, look after their
Um,
well-being, but don't talk to them.
yeah, yeah, he's said things, like wait till the issues arise and then deal with them then. Don't, not allowed in the sheds, not allowed at training, things like that. So, personally, it's been a bit of a challenge, a bit of a struggle at times. But I think when you've got the passion and the care for the athletes, you always find a way.
Yeah, that's crazy. But as you just said, I think if you're passionate and you care enough, yeah, you're going to find a way. But it's interesting. Like, what are some of the things that you will encourage players or anyone you're working with to sort of adopt or to look into, take on, to foster a better sense of well-being for themselves. So I'm thinking, trying to find out a couple of little tips here for any of the listeners, because amongst health practitioners, I think it's allied health practitioners generally have a career span. It's about 5 years max, and then they move on. And if that's from burnout or losing a sense of value in the role, whatever it might be, but is there a couple of tips that someone might be able to implement to better care for themselves that might encourage that to lengthen out?
Yeah, I reckon it's all of those things that we all know, but kind of forget. You know, things like sleep is probably one of the number one things that we talk to athletes about. And that's just anyone in general, really. Like if you get less than 6 hours sleep, you know, consecutively 3 days a week, like your functioning is dropped by about 60%. And that's just in terms of, you know, being able to think, being able to rationalize, being able to plan and, you know, communicate with people. So first is get some good sleep in. And I think routine is probably the next thing. You know, we're creatures of habit as humans. So once we start to find our routine and roll through the day, you know, we actually get to use parts of our brain that can start to work on different things. So, you know, we speak about pre-sleep routine with the athletes a lot. You know, what are you doing when you get home to prepare yourself for sleep? And a lot of us are on our phones. So that's probably one of the first things is really make an effort to not be on your phone or watching TV up to half an hour before going to bed.
Mm.
But also, like one of the biggest things that changed for me in learning on well-being and learning about strategies was meditation. And really that is just training and awareness. You know, I think we always, when I speak to people about meditation is, oh, you know, I can't do it. It's not for me. Yeah, I can't stop thinking. And it's like, yeah, but no one can. Like that's the point of meditation is just slowing down and noticing what you're thinking about. And that gives you the power to actually make change in your decisions and where you're putting your energy. You know, if you notice that this person at work keeps coming up in your mind, well, maybe that's something you need to address.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I give myself a little pat on the back. I sort of try to write things down and take more notice of, I think, the little things in the day to day that add up to matter for me. And as you've just touched on, sleep is one of those. Certainly notice if my sleep goes a little bit off tilt, my emotional regulation starts to struggle. I get a little bit more grumpy and a little bit all over the place. So yeah, certainly need to pay attention to that. But along the way, Holly, have you had any mentors or sort of role models, anyone that you've really looked up to that's guided you along the way?
Yeah, definitely. I've had a fair few people across my career, which I've been really lucky with. In terms of, you know, been in the high performance environment for a long time and just about navigating the pressure of high performance. And that comes down to the athletes and working with them, but also like managing your time and really finding time to make sure that you do things for you, because working in sport, the hours are unkind and they're unforgiving. I guess when you lift a trophy at the end of the season, like it makes it all worth it. But at the end of the day, it's only one team that lifts the trophy. So, you know, there's hundreds of people involved in chasing that dream all season and you know there's only one team that actually gets to lift it, so you need to make sure that you're doing other things as well, that I guess, you know, the cliche filling up your cup kind of thing, but making sure that you are finding joy in the small things and that you've got really great, good quality, meaningful relationships and connections around you. You know, that you can have those chats and things like that. And I guess as a well-being manager, like that is the role for me with my athletes, is being that person there that they can talk to about whatever they need to.
Nice. One of the things you just touched on there was time management. Is that something you get as a response a fair bit of the time? Are you talking about a concept or implementing something that would be really beneficial, and then the reply of "I don't have time"?
Mm,
How do you address
yeah.
that?
Yeah, I think that's like the most common thing I hear is I don't have time.
Yeah,
And, you know, I definitely have said it myself
yeah,
when it comes to different things. And usually it's something new that I may be unsure about, you know, oh, no, I just don't have time. But that's where the beauty lies, is in that challenge. And that's where we do all the growing and the learning, is trying new things and actually programming in the time for it, which is why I kind of touched on routine being so important. Is you're actually writing down, get up, going to brush my teeth, then I'm going to do this, this, and this, and it becomes part of your routine. And then you've been up for a couple of hours, and I've been up I've been up for almost 5 hours. Sorry, 4 hours. I'm not getting up that early. I've done my Pilates, I've gone for a walk, I've done my meditation, had my coffee, and done some note taking in terms of what I want to achieve for the day, and then you kind of get into it. Now, it doesn't always look like that. Each day provides challenges and different things. The weather could throw us off, your car breaks down, something happens to someone in your family, and things are thrown off course. But knowing that you've got a bit of a rough plan and a routine of things you want to achieve, and when are you going to eat and what are you going to eat, it's those simple things, food, water, sleep, making sure you tick them off, usually holds you in pretty good stead for the day.
Yeah, I think what you were touching on as well, where you get the reply from a lot of people, I don't have time. I think what you said earlier in the podcast, with a large part of your role is to have great relationships and to be able to communicate well with these people. And I think if you don't have a strong relationship with any of the people you're working with, and you can't communicate very well, then there's not going to be a lot of trust there that they take on the thing that you're suggesting is ultimately beneficial for them. And then it just gets a chance to become part of that routine that you're talking about. So yeah, I think there's a real thread here with people that are just anyone that works with another person is it's trust and relationships and quality communication. I think it all stems from there. And then you can build, as you've just touched on, a solid routine that allows wellness and health to flourish from there.
Yeah, I think also, sorry, I've got Ren just barking here in the background. Can you hear that?
I
I'll just
can't
shut the
hear
door.
that. So you're
Oh,
all
you
right.
can't hear it?
No, I can't hear
Ren.
it. If any of the listeners can hear it. What's your dog's? Is your dog?
It's his name's Ren. It's actually my housemate's brother's dog. He's a kids therapy dog. So he goes into schools and works with kids. So we're just looking after him for a couple of weeks. Sorry about that.
He sounds cute. I'm sure the
He is
listeners will
cute.
forgive you.
He's a black lab.
Oh, there you go.
I just wanted probably to touch on, when we talk about well-being, is we always have the individual at the center of that. So, everyone's life has been different. Everyone's upbringing and experiences is going to be different, but it's really the values and the strengths of that individual that will influence their overall well-being. I think when we talk about well-being, there's so many different aspects. You've got, psychological, you've got the physical, you've got cultural background, you've got, financial situation, where they live, like what's their community like. There's so many different aspects to a person, and some of those areas will be really important to some, and some won't. But it's really about making specific choices in terms of value driven for your well-being. And at the end of the day, you're the one that's in control. We try and blame other people, but at the end of the day, it's self-determined. That's one of the theories that we use, the self-determination theory. And I think at the end of the day, you'll always do what you want to do. You make your choices. So it's about understanding who you are and who you want to be, and making choices in alignment with that.
Yeah. And is that sort of the basis where it's chewed, where that has come from? So, because I mean, on the surface, you can look at that and go, all the things we're talking about today, geez, I'm busy. I don't have time for that. I don't really know about that. And then we can bring in someone like you who can then help educate around that and educate us on how to help other people with that. Is that sort of where Chewed came from? Is that the basis of it?
Yeah, that is. And I
Tell us
think
a bit more about it. Yeah.
so Tude, is a play off of attitude, in terms of being able to choose our attitude, but it also stands for, really teaching people how to thrive in life, how to understand who they are, how to develop their opportunities, and how to actually enjoy the process of it. I think sometimes we get bogged down you know, setting goals and feeling like I need to change and I need to be different and I need to do this. And it's like, yeah, in some aspects you do, but how do we actually enjoy doing that? And how do you do that? You need to tap into who you are and what your life is and what's gone before you. And I think you know, people that work with other people, especially in the health professions, is as soon as, and you touched on it before around that trust piece, is, you know, really getting to know someone, like asking not how their day is, but, you know, what's their, who's in their family and who's special to them and what brings them joy. What are those things that they like doing, and, you know, their hobbies and things like that. Is that gives you little insights into them, and then you can touch on those to build deeper connection. You know, like, oh, I mentioned, you know, you like gardening. How's that going? What are you growing at the moment? What's in your garden, or something around, you know, cooking or painting or whatever it is for that person. Um, that's how you build deeper connection. And if we talk about sporting organisations, the most successful sporting organisations have a real sense of belonging and culture. And that comes from Ren. Sorry, he wants to be on the podcast as well, I think. That comes from getting to know people. So that's, you know, relationships, really, really important.
Yeah. And TUDE is built around using evidence-based practice research to guide wellness. And would goal setting be one of those things that you will implement?
Yeah, absolutely. Depending on what the individual or the organisation wants to get out of, I guess, having me around.
Yeah.
So working one-on-one with a few athletes at the moment, and that's based around firstly understanding their values and strengths, and then setting some goals around that. So we try and steer clear of performance-related goals, you know, like wanting to get in the starting side or something like that.
That was going to be my next question, but please keep going.
Yeah, I think, you know, sit down with an athlete, you know, what do you want to do? And it's like, oh, I want to play in the starting 17 or whatnot. And it's like, yeah, that's what everyone does. Like, that's just a given. You know, that should just be a goal regardless of what are the things outside of that that are going to hold you in the best position to be able to do that. And that's going to be things like sleep. That's going to be recovery. That's going to be journaling. That's going to be practicing gratitude and mindfulness and getting out into the community and giving back. And you know, if you want to read the research, which normally they don't, is yeah, here it is, and this is what the most successful athletes and organizations are doing. And it's not just athletes as well. Like, should we go into businesses as well, and talk to executives and talk to managers and employees about what they can do outside of your day-to-day job, regardless of whatever that is. You know, that's their performance. Might not be on field, but it's, you know, behind a laptop, or it's treating patients or whatever it is. But how do you be your best self to be able to complete your role at its best?
Yeah, that's fantastic. I want to sort of stick on that for a second, but the goal setting in particular. So it's something that we incorporate here every day for ourselves, and then obviously for our clients, patients that come through. But there's a sentiment, sort of not necessarily here, but in general, that, you know, goal setting is not that beneficial because, you know, even if I do achieve the goal, it's just sort of, all right, it's done, and now what? Like we don't sort of appreciate that or spend a lot of time on that. It's just, all right, what's next? So it's not awesome on that front. Or, you know, I don't achieve my goal, and so now I feel worthless because I didn't achieve my goal. But then, to what you were saying there, it's you need to have a strategy and actions in place towards the goal. So like a verb, you're doing things towards that end outcome, and you're focusing on that process, and then the outcome sort of takes care of itself. That's what you're saying there.
Yeah, definitely. I think it depends on the goal as well. Like, depends on what it actually is. And it's always good to have that driven internally motivated.
Mm.
I'm just going to pause 1 sec. I'm just going to shut this door. He's distracting me.
Alrighty, we're back. We've handled Ren. We're back into it.
Yeah,
So
Ren's outside. Yeah, so I think it, like touching on the goals depends on what the goal is. And like you mentioned as well, you've got to be really specific in the actions that you're going to take, you know. So the goal might be to have a better sleep routine, for example. You know, by the end of the year, you know, so it's September now. We've got, you know, a few months to go by the end of the year. Like, what am I going to do each month? How am I going to break that down? What are the little things I want to achieve over that time? And then what am I going to actually going to do day to day to kind of build into that goal? And I think, you know, sometimes we forget as well is like life is just like lots of little mini goals
Mm.
that we're constantly achieving. We just don't really talk about it that much. Um, so like you said, you know, I achieved my goal and then what? And it's like, well, you know, what's the next thing? Like
Yeah.
what else are you going to do kind of? And sometimes that can be a bit overwhelming and a little bit like, oh, it's just things never stop. But that's where you got to program your well-being goals. You know, things might never stop, but it's like I want to, you know, initially I made a goal that I wanted to meditate just generally. And then I decided, you know, I was going to be a month. And then I kept doing that. And then I was like, okay, I'm just going to set a goal for a year, like 365 days. And
Mm.
I did that. And there were days where I would just meditate for like a minute because I, you know, couldn't be bothered. But the idea was that I was going to do it every day. And then that kind of builds in discipline, it builds in consistency, it builds in resilience to be able to, you know, adapt and change. And that's why goals are really important.
Mm.
And then now I just do it. It's just part of my routine. It's part of who I am.
Yeah, and I think the underlying thing there would be that it's tied to the broader sort of emotional benefit of it. Like I do this every day because, and they're tied to that higher value. So that's something we try to encourage all our guys here. Is something you touched on there is I want to be in the starting 17 or something like that. And it's like, well, okay, it could be reduced down to you need to get 8 hours of quality sleep per night. And it's like, well, sleep is not my goal, but it is going to allow me to get towards that emotional endpoint that is starting 17. So I think that's an important thing to touch on. It's so prevalent. Like you need to be doing it in so many different walks of life, and I think it gets messed up a fair bit. So I'm stoked we got to touch on that there today.
Yeah, I think one of the other things was I think it's important to kind of look at well-being as if it's almost like a tree in
Mm.
the sense that, you know, like you want your tree to be green and flourishing and strong and big branches and things like that. But to do that, it needs to have a really strong root system. You know, it needs to have great foundations, and that's where those little things for your own personal journey are really important. What are those roots in the ground going to be for you? How are you going to get your energy, and what's that going to look like? Because there are going to be storms that are going to come. And if you want your tree to be able to withstand those storms, it needs to have a strong root system. You know, you can't see challenge and issues and hardship on the horizon and then just suddenly grow those roots. You know, like
Yeah.
it's like, you know, no, I'm not going to meditate because like I feel good. I only meditate when I'm stressed. And it's like, but meditating every day, as an example, getting your good hours sleep, eating the right food, you know, planning out your to-do list and getting a head start on those assignments type of thing. Like they're the little actions that build a strong root system so that when the disaster happens, you're able to bounce back. You know, you might break a few little branches or whatever, but those mistakes, those issues are going to happen. Like there are going to be storms. So how are you going to withstand that?
Yeah, I love this on your website. So a tree with strong roots can withstand the most violent storm, but the tree cannot grow its roots just as the storm appears on the horizon. So I think that's sort of a great sort of quite representing what you're saying. Another one I like to that front is when did Noah build the ark? Before the rain. And I think that's a great reference to sort of sum up what you're saying as well. It's start now because it's
Yeah,
not always going to be smooth.
no, that's right.
Cool. All right, Holly, where's Tude going next? What's on the horizon? What's the big plans?
We've actually just started rolling out some new apparel, and the apparel has wellbeing strategies attached to it.
Nice.
So I think, when I talk about enjoying the process is sometimes, and we say we don't have time for things, is, well, we actually do. And one of those times is when we get changed and when we put our clothes on to start the day and step into life and take those next steps into whatever that may be. So it's just piggybacking wellbeing strategies with some apparel. So we're looking to bring that out towards the end of the year, and some journals as well for people to work through. So I think we find when we go and we run workshops and sessions is people want more resources to kind of remind them of what we've spoken about. So we're just working on things like that at the moment. So I'm really looking forward to that, and seeing who else we can really help achieve their potential.
Cool. You just touched on some workshops. What's are they sort of to whatever the person needs or company needs, or is it
Yeah.
programs?
We've got a few set ones. So one just around like your general understanding of well-being. So setting some well-being goals. So looking at things holistically. The other one is mindfulness strategies. So that taps into a few different breathing techniques, and then gratitude as well. So really looking at positive psychology tools. So that's some of the evidence-based practices that we use, and not just that, but also mindfulness, which is, a bit of a key word at the moment, but really proven and shown that if you implement small strategies and over time, you actually become more calm, and that gives you greater clarity and better able to make decisions, on the field, off the field, at work, in life, especially as I'm getting a little bit older, like a lot of my friends with kids now, is, how do we help parents with, the lack of sleep that's going to be there.
I'm listening.
And yeah, I don't have kids, but a lot of my friends do, and I see the pain that they're going through. So yeah, trying to just look at different strategies to help as many people. Yeah, but really based on what the organisation wants.
Yeah, nice. Well, just at the risk of sort of going down a bit of a rabbit hole here, but really quickly, one of the things just on mindfulness there and gratitude, I try to check in with guys fairly regularly about, what was your win last week? What was great for you? And sometimes you'll hear, oh, yeah, not much. It was just a normal week. And I think they're really struggling to see the great things that happened for them, or that they got through in that prior week or month, whatever it might be. What would you say in that sort of situation or circumstance? How do you encourage someone to see all the little positive things?
I think, well, firstly, it's a more regular gratitude practice, and that can be as simple as grateful for lunch today. Looking at what were the things. So I usually ask them things like that, like what did they eat, how did they sleep, did they have a meaningful conversation with someone, like, so thinking about it in terms of the biopsychosocial model. So biologically, psychologically, so like thinking, emotions, feelings, and then socially, meaning relationships and I guess other people. So asking questions around those three things, and then they start to kind of get a bit of an idea of when I ask that question again, is I'm looking for the little things. And gratitude is a wonderful thing, and the more you practice it, the more you actually program your neurons in your brain to look for the positive things. It is proven science, so that's why it is such a big thing at the moment. And we can be more kind and more thoughtful by just practicing gratitude more regularly.
Yeah, nice. I think it's a good reminder. Like, consider, the biopsychosocial, the whole lot, the whole person. So I think that's a wonderful point to get us towards the end of the podcast today, just sort of considering time. But before we do, is there anything else that we've missed today that you would like to cover or bring up on the podcast today?
No, not really. I guess I'd probably ask you, Chris, like, what's your well-being strategy that you use for you?
Well, yeah. So mine's taken some development over time, I would say. So I've gone through that gamut of things we've spoken about today, toward at the start, like being more of the physical and let's get in the gym and train, and my sport on the weekends and things like that. And hey, Chris, do you want to do some mindfulness? Like, no, I don't. Okay. So that was sort of where I started. And then um, coming to Hunter Rehab and then having to take on further roles here, I needed to sort of learn essentially. So I started with just a bit of a journal, just a book where I just start to write things down, like what was on my mind, things like that, which was good. But if I had stressful moments, things like that, I'd be sort of reminiscing or going over these stressful things. And I didn't find that to be overly helpful. So then I started to incorporate, as we touched on, some gratitude. Like, well, what was a good thing that happened today? And then so I was starting to think about those things and be grateful for those things. And now I've within that there was goal setting as well, which was sort of about outcomes and performance based things. And now it's I just every day or every week I sort of plan my week, and then I have habits. So things that I want to achieve, which is 3 liters of water a day. Did I do some exercise today? I need to read 10 pages today. Did I take my dog for a walk today? So I have these habits that I like to tick off every day. And to what you said, like not every day does that happen, but more often than not, I'll have these healthy habits that I'm ticking off, and I can see that I'm ticking them off. And it's not about an outcome, but it's just that makes me feel better and perform better overall. So that's my approach at the moment.
Amazing.
But
Love that. Love it.
I try to keep that going, but as you say, it's a habit.
Yeah. And I think it's also knowing, like you said, like there are going to be those days where things don't go to plan, and rather than beat yourself up and go over and over and over and over again,
Mm.
is sometimes it is writing it out and parking it and moving on, or tapping back into one of those things that bring you joy and happiness and focusing your energy on that. So yeah, appreciate that. Thanks for sharing that, Chris.
No worries. I thought, oh, geez, I better not get in trouble here. I hope this is good.
Something's better than nothing.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to wrap it up on today. So we'll leave it there. But thank you very much for your time and all those wonderful insights. I'm sure our listeners, if they're paying attention, there's some really brilliant things there that'll help their own well-being and allow them to kick on into the next parts of their career and life. So thanks very much for your time today,
Absolutely.
Holly.
Thanks, Chris. Chat soon.
No worries. Bye for now.